Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Stephen Pynakker, and I'm very excited about these two guests I'm having on my program. I'll give you a little background here. Well, first of all, let's just welcome my two friends here, Jared Huff and Jefferson Draschil. Did I get Draschil right? Draschil.
Yeah, there we go.
Jefferson Draschil, and welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having us. We're really excited to be here.
So you're Jefferson, and then Jared, you say hello.
Hello.
Okay, so Jared is a cool dude. We got to be friends last time I was out in Utah. He showed up to my meetup. We'll talk about that later on. It's kind of an interesting story. I think it's kind of funny how it all went down. And but yeah, he showed up for my meetup, and we got to spend some time with each other. It was really, really cool. So it was an awesome time. And one of the reasons you reached out to me, Jared, because I had sent you some photos of some missionaries that I had come over to my house for a pizza party. We had pizza, we had chicken wings, we had cookies and cream ice cream, because that was a request by one of the missionaries that we specifically have that. And I know you people out there in Utah, you love your ice cream. So we had ice cream, and we had a good time fellowshipping with each other with some interfaith dialogue. And I remember you commenting to me, Jared, you said that looked very wholesome, and it was. It was a very wholesome affair. And so you said, hey, why? Because I've been talking about having missionaries come on the program, and I'm actually friends with the Tampa mission president, and we've discussed the possibility about him coming on, and also some of the local missionaries. But I also wanted to talk to people who had served their missions, and you had mentioned, hey, about a year and a half ago, me and my buddy, my companion here, we served in Poland, so perhaps we can come on and talk about the program. Is that kind of how it went down, Jared?
I remember, so I mentioned when you sent me those photos, it was very reminiscent of my mission, or at least my mission experience, like eating with members. I think you actually initiated the idea first.
Oh, okay. I don't remember.
But I was totally down for it. And then I asked if he could come along, and you were okay with that.
Well, that's cool. And I got to actually talk to Jefferson the other day, and kind of get filled in on your background as well. And so you wanted to come on and just talk about your experience, both of you, as missionaries in Poland. Now, it's interesting because you guys served during the COVID time, kind of as it was wrapping up, but it still affected your mission. So you weren't initially well, I think maybe Jefferson, you were in Poland, but Jared got stuck stateside. So that's what happened, right? But before we actually do that, let's go a little bit further back in time, and let's talk about what led to you being on your missions. So let's start with you, Jared. Tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, were you born in the covenant, and just a little bit about your life so far, leading up to your mission experience.
Okay, so yeah, I was born in Taiwan, and then I moved to Utah when I was 3 years old, and I'm from South Jordan, Utah. I was born in the covenant. All my life I've been in the LDS Church. I've always believed. I would say before the mission, I guess I was very like deep into gospel studies. I would read scriptures every day, I'd pray every day, and all that. And I want to say at the time, my belief was that if you had a question, then you could probably find an answer in the scriptures, or at least in part in the scriptures. That was really my mindset at the time, right before the mission.
Okay, and so you would say you were a believer, you were a faithful Latter-day Saint. I'm assuming you got baptized when you were 8 years old, correct?
Yep.
And you did all the stuff, Aaronic priesthood, Melchizedek priesthood. So you basically pretty prototypical Utah Mormon life, would you say?
I would say that.
Now, just so I could get to know a little bit more about you, did you have favorite hobbies? Did you play sports in high school? Anything like that?
Not a ton of sports, but I really liked tennis. Like I was never really like super good at it, but I did like tennis. I did a lot of music growing up. I started piano when I was 7, and I learned the trumpet in middle school. I play video games from time to time. I don't call myself a gamer because like I'm very picky when it comes to video games, but I do play them from time.
Okay. And you had mentioned too that you'd like to maybe do music for video games at some point. Is that correct?
That's right. I'd like to compose.
Okay. And have you ever heard of Gaynor Brunson of the Brunson Brothers Trumpet Group? Are you familiar with them?
I am not at all familiar.
Okay, they were huge in the 80s, and Gaynor's been on my program. They're all Latter-day Saints, and they actually had the first digital recording studio in California in the 1980s. Everybody else was still analog. Look up the Brunson Brothers, folks. They did some crazy stuff with the trumpets, and there's a thing called a Brunson that you do as a trumpeter. It's called a Brunson. That's what it's named after, is the Brunson Brothers. So look them up. Cool stuff. So you do the piano, you do the trumpet. That's cool. So you basically a good Mormon boy goes, serves on a mission, and that is Jared's story. Now let's move on to Jefferson. Now, Jefferson, I hear it's a completely different story. You came from a disaster. No, I'm just joking. I don't know anything about your past. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
But a bit of a different story, yeah. Yeah, I grew up, I was born in American Fork, and I grew up here in Utah. Almost all of my life, I spent some time down in Texas. And from time to time, at least until I was about 13, I would go with my mother to visit her parents in Russia, up near St. Petersburg. And I've always really felt in touch with my Slavic roots, which is why I was happy to be called to serve in Poland. I didn't even know Poland was a Slavic country. Up until that point, I just knew sort of what you learn in history class, you know? Yeah, my experience going on the mission, I didn't even go until I was just about 20.
Oh, okay. So let's talk a little bit about that. So this is interesting, both of you, is that both of you have mothers that are like originally from foreign countries. So your mother was from Russia, and Jared, your mother is from Taiwan. And so it's a little international flavor here in our conversation. But Jefferson, so you're saying that you waited till you're like 20 to serve your mission. Before we get there, just tell me, was there anything like, what kind of Mormon were you? Were you a pretty like a TBM, just basically true blue Mormon all your life, or did you have any questions growing up? What was your faith journey like?
I absolutely had questions. Growing up, I lived here in Provo for most of it. And in Provo, it's a very college town. You get either new families or really old families. So there weren't a whole ton of kids my age. Growing up, I was effectively the only deacon, the only teacher, and the only priest for some time. So my experience there is I didn't really have anyone to like identify with my age, you know, and your testimony at some point as you grow up kind of stops relying on your parents or people that you're around and starts to have to form yourself. I had a lot of questions. And when I was 16, I didn't think I was going to go on a mission because I wanted to, I was thinking of going into medicine, and I figured that would take 2 years off my life. That's forever. But when I turned, like right before I turned 18, I had a small change of heart, I would say, because my mom, she was never the kind of person that was like, you're going on a mission. She and my dad were both very supportive. They both said that if a mission is right, then you go. If it's not, then don't. So all she asked was that I read Book of Mormon and search for that answer for myself if I was supposed to go, because I was already having a lot of questions. Not like a massive faith crisis or anything, but questions regarding what I did in fact believe in. And I decided I was going to go on a mission at 18, and then I got into a car accident right after I turned 18. And that for a few reasons, it pushed my time out for 2 whole years.
So talk a little bit about that. Was it a pretty serious accident?
It wasn't. The problem was that I was test driving this car that I just gotten fixed, and I didn't know that my parents took it off the insurance. So when I crashed it, it was without insurance. That just piled money onto there. I had to pay for the medical bills of this other guy, which it wasn't a serious accident. He was just older. And so it was just in case medical bills, you know? And so I had to pay for that. I had to make sure I had to pay that out of my mission fund, and then work for a couple of years to save up money to pay off a few things. And then when I was 20, I was ready and I left, which is nice because I was in the group right ahead of his. So I barely made it into Poland right before the coronavirus began. Like I had
and I want to talk about that, but I just want to ask you, as somebody here you are, you just turned 18, and something like this happens, or you get into this car accident. It's kind of a disaster, a real setback for you, because it puts you financially. I mean, that's very unusual for an 18-year-old to have those kind of financial burdens put on them. So, what was it like to get through those financial burdens, and also how did your faith sustain you during this period of time?
Well, I didn't really think about it in a faith context for the first couple of months. I was just trying to navigate all of these new adult responsibilities that were being piled onto me, because I figured that I would turn 18, I'd be easing myself into what it is to be an adult, to take responsibility for things that you wouldn't have to when you're younger. And it just kind of fell on top of me. So after I kind of got my bearings, at that point, I really had started deciding that these are things that I believe. I was receiving the right answers through prayer, the ones that were leading me there. And so I prayed to God. I was seeking help from my parents, from family members, people who'd experienced the things that I was going through. But primarily, I was looking for both support and revelation from God. And that's something that I don't think I really did for most of my life. Like, as you grow up, LDS, you don't really think you learn the things, but you aren't really a convert until you convert yourself, So
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a great point. So now this is the events leading up to your mission. So Jerry, let's get you back in the conversation here. So then we'll switch back to you, Jefferson. So tell us now. So you, what did you know for sure you were always going to serve a mission, or was this something kind of like him when you turned 18? You said, okay. So what was your mindset leading up to you becoming a missionary?
So I always expected to serve a mission. It's not that, well, of course, my parents very much encouraged me to do so, but like I wanted to, partially because I didn't want to let anybody down, but I didn't want to let myself down. So there was definitely some people influenced on that, but very much like I wanted to do it because I knew it was best. Now, I wouldn't say that I was like the most loving person out there. Like I wasn't thinking like I want to serve a mission so I could share the gospel to everyone, so people can be converted to Jesus Christ and kind of thing. I just felt that it was a good thing to do, and that it would be also good for others as well as myself. So that was kind of my perspective on it when I was growing up.
Okay, so now you tell us a little bit about your experience going to the MTC. What was that like? It's like a boot camp, or describe to me too this context of this being kind of like we're also talking about COVID times here too. So talk a little bit about your experience there.
Okay, so I got in the MTC February 5th, 2020. So this was like a month before COVID really got big. Like no one was talking about it at the time I got in the MTC until about like 3 weeks later. So when I got there, it was just totally normal pre-COVID world, standard MTC protocol. So it was really interesting living in that life for just a few weeks, and then everything changes a month later.
So what happens? What happens a month later? What kind of changes did they make?
So they wanted to emphasize like washing your hands a bunch. Don't be so touchy with one another.
bump elbows, yeah.
They also actually they kind of were already like that because it was winter season, but it got even more intense. I remember they started giving us wrapped utensils in the cafeteria, or the utensils actually got really cheaper. The quality kind of went down for a lot of things. That was interesting. Yeah, social distancing too became was then emphasized.
And of course, at the time that you weren't wearing masks because we didn't have there's a shortage of masks. So eventually, then of course, you're probably all wearing masks once they become more.
I didn't get a mask until I left the MTC.
Oh, okay. So how long were you in the MTC for? When did you? And then what happens after that? Because you didn't get to Poland right away.
So I was there for 7 weeks, so that was just 2 weeks shorter than the 9 weeks that they normally do. And then 1 week before we left, they gave everybody a reassignment. So all of us, like everyone in my district, we were all kind of like freaking out, like what's gonna happen to us? We all got different assignments except for me and one other sister. In my district, we both served in Arizona, Mesa, Arizona together. So we were on the same, we took a train to the airport and we took a plane to Arizona.
Now, at the time, you're learning Polish at the MTC, correct? Okay, so because at this point you're assigned to Poland and you're learning Polish, but then next thing you know, you're in Arizona.
Right, right. Now back at the MTC, I got very obsessed with learning Polish. Like it became like a lifestyle even, or a hobby, I would say. Actually, I really liked the fact that we weren't allowed to play video games or watch TV kind of a thing, because it meant that I could focus on other things without worrying about it. I wouldn't have to worry about hanging out with friends because, you know, that's not like what you would consider what you do every day, but you could consider doing Polish every day. So that, yeah, it became a little bit of an obsession for me. So like throughout my mission, like in the States, waiting to go to Poland, I kept up with my studying. Some of my companions found it a little annoying, but I studied as hard as I could. So, and then when I actually got to Poland, my Polish grammar was about as good as his. Like he was my first companion, and then I just needed to really get into the groove of speaking.
Okay, so now I'm asking, do you have any did you learn any? Because I'm not sure which language they speak in Taiwan, but do you speak any Taiwanese? I know that's not the right way.
So the older folk in Taiwan speak Taiwanese, but most everybody speaks Mandarin.
Okay.
I was really young. I did speak a little bit of Mandarin, but after I moved to the States, I can't remember much, but I feel like my parents just started talking to me in English more, and then I forgot Mandarin.
Okay. Okay. Well, so you were like kind of raised bilingual, which probably helps in learning another language, I suspect, even though it's not a related language or anything like that. So so that's very interesting. So and actually, Jefferson and I talked about this the other day, that when you decide to do something, you go all in and focus on it. So that sounds very much like how you would describe in Jefferson. So Jefferson, so now let's talk a little bit about your MTC experience and then how you ended up in Poland.
Yeah, for me, getting into the MPC was not what I expected it to be. First going in, I see people that are like crying with their family members. There was this one person in my zone who it seemed like he was the first time he was away from home, and that was a challenge that he was really having to come to terms with. It was kind of bye, I love you, see you in 2 years, which honestly I kind of preferred. The MTC was nice. I really appreciated that as well, that they were cutting us off of a lot of what you would call temporal or worldly things. You'd be able to focus a lot more on the language. And just like Jared, I threw myself in at it as well, because I like to, I'm not sure who first said it, but like whatever I am, I want to be a good one. I want to be the best at it. Mm-hmm. And so jumping into Polish, I was fascinated by how similar it was to Russian. Like the verb for to read is the same, just for the ending. You say a t instead of a ch in Russian. It's crazy. So I was having this completely different experience from a lot of the missionaries who were rote memorizing because they didn't know any Slavic languages. And for me, the issue was less learning and more trying to keep it separate from Russian. The way I saw it, it's like two different houses built by the same architect, like designed by the same person, but filled out by a different interior designer.
Okay.
And they were just starting up with all of what I now think of as coronavirus mandates, but they were just flu season things. Everyone keep your distance. They weren't calling it social distancing at that time. If you want, don't shake hands, bump elbows. It was all of these bizarre. Yeah, it was something to get used to for sure. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'd ever experienced anything like it. And then I was able to go out to Poland straight out after the 9 weeks. And we got there and we had a full month of what you would call regular missionary work, at least back then. Where
So
you would
when was this in relation? When did you get to Poland? What was the date?
February 3rd, so a couple days before he even got into the MTC.
Okay, so you got out right before the world turns upside down.
Yeah, exactly. And I had 3 Christmases on the mission. I had 1 Christmas in the MTC and then 2 out in the field. A Christmas in the MTC is really something to experience, honestly.
Oh, interesting. What's it like?
It's the first time that I think I've had a Christmas that was entirely focused on Jesus Christ. And I really liked that. And that's something that I've tried to keep even coming home. We focus a lot more on a lot of commercial things with Christmas, a lot of, honestly, traditions that were derived from paganism, which are fun, I suppose, but learning to turn everything back toward Jesus Christ was something really revelatory to me. Completely changed the way that I saw my missionary work and saw my life after the mission going.
Okay, so now you're both on track here. Now, Jared, you are wallowing in Arizona, thinking, okay, I learned, but you're throwing yourself into the Polish stuff, not even knowing if you're even going to make it to Poland. You don't give up. You have hope. You're going to find your way to Poland. So that must have been was learning Polish just like, or studying it. You just that was probably just kept you on track and was able to keep you on, because imagine part of you was probably thinking, I may not even see Poland.
Yeah, that was a fear of mine. I very much did not want that to be true.
So did you get depressed at all during this time?
I wouldn't say depressed. Somehow, like, I kept my spirits high. Honestly, like, my mission, at least even in quarantine, I was probably like the happiest I'd been since like before the mission, which was nice. I did okay staying indoors all the time. That actually wasn't a challenge for me.
Well, you're a bit of an introvert, so you probably didn't mind. So are you just mostly doing just social media missionary work at that time?
Kind of. So in Arizona, at least in Mesa, I want to say like in the like neighborhood I lived in, probably like a quarter, maybe like 15% of the people were all members of the church. So pretty high member ratio. So everyone around us pretty much has already heard of the gospel, at least like the Mormon gospel, or like what we teach, or at least just some, or at least a tiny bit, or at least have heard of us. So it wasn't very easy to do social media work in our city. Sometimes like we would have like missionaries, just like friending people, just random people in Facebook groups all over the world. We video chatted with people from the Philippines, people from random states, anywhere. So yeah, social media work was very different in Arizona. But I would say for the most part, we spent most of our time with the members, having video chat lessons with them, hoping they would have people to teach for us. Most of the time they didn't, so it was kind of just teaching members over and over again.
Were you ever able to use any of your Polish language skills at all while in Arizona?
Actually, there was one member, he wasn't even in my stake, but somebody referred him to, like, he was a member, of course, but we allowed some Polish chatting together. He helped me with some language things on the mission.
Okay. Cool. So now, when do you get to Poland finally?
So I get to Poland November 30th, about 2020.
Yeah.
So see, the story was, though, I remember I was with at the time, like November 5th, my companion, we were just having dinner together in our apartment. And then I get a phone call from the mission president, and I'm thinking, oh, he's gonna ask me to be a district leader or something. Like I had no idea what was coming next, but I answered, and then he was like, Elder Huff, we're gonna miss you, but you're going to Europe. Like, what? Europe, but you didn't say Poland.
Right.
So he said that in a week from then, I would be flying to England, and then we would go to the MTC there, and then we would quarantine there for a couple weeks, and then from England, we would fly to Poland. And I was so shocked when I heard that, because it was out of the blue, totally unexpected. I had actually been checking like the the border restrictions, and like we're the US can't even fly directly to Poland right now. So like I didn't even consider it a possibility, but he caught me off guard. And honestly, that was the most exciting moment of my mission. It's just knowing that I could get to finally go to Poland. It was wild.
Okay, interesting. So, all right. So now Jefferson, let's you're in Poland, and you're in this, and of course at this point you feel like you're probably know the language pretty well. You're engaging people. I'm curious because of course Poland is a big Roman Catholic country. It's like what 80-90% probably Roman Catholic, right? And if not more, right? And of course I did have a quick question just going back because you have a Russian background. Jefferson, was your mother a convert to Mormonism, or was she raised in the Russian Orthodox Church?
She wasn't really raised religious at all. Her father was, I guess it's fine to say, her father was in the Russian army while she was growing up. And so, no, she didn't really have much of a religious experience in that way. And then she and her mother met with missionaries, and they both got baptized. And then after that, that's when my father met her when he was on his mission.
Okay, very interesting. Now, of course, we know now there's a lot of restrictions on Mormon missionary work in Russia now, but in the 90s, they really opened things up. They allowed all Christian missionaries to come in, and the evangelicals still, we have pretty well, I think there seems to be a relationship between the Russians and evangelicals that's pretty solid. So I don't think they go after us too much, but they went after the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons in Russia. They can't do the missionary work that they used to be able to. But there was a period of time with Glasnost where things were very open, and they allowed all different religious groups to do this stuff. So you go to this Roman Catholic country, and you're trying to tell them about this young boy who dug up these plates. By the way, this is the 200th anniversary coming up next month, the 200th anniversary of the coming forth of the plates. So you come to this Catholic country and explain to them there's this young boy who found these plates, who also, as a young boy, had a first vision where he saw God and Jesus. How does a Mormon missionary explain the gospel, if you will, or Mormon ideas to a Catholic?
Well, the first thing that we always try to do is the way we see it is it's not completely changing the doctrine. What it is it's taking what you know from the scriptures and adding on to it. That's the whole point of the doctrine. That was the whole point of the restoration, because there were so many churches that were all building on what the Bible had to offer and going in infinite different directions. And you have Joseph Smith, who was called as a prophet, who was prepared to translate by the power of God these plates to give a second witness of Jesus Christ, two sets of scriptures that together give you the fullness of that gospel. And so we explained it as the Book of Mormon is not a replacement, just as Jesus Christ said to the Jews that he did not come to like completely abolish, to remove the law of Moses, but to replace it or to fulfill it. In the same way, the gospel, the Book of Mormon was meant to add to the Bible and add to the doctrine that was already known by the Roman Catholic. And a lot of them say they're Roman Catholic, but it's really tied into the Polish identity, like as a
culture thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of them don't really practice or don't practice as a Roman Catholic would. They just attend the holiday masses, maybe one or two Sundays throughout the year. A lot more people than I initially thought were open to hearing and experimenting on their faith with the new edition of gospel that we were bringing.
Okay, so so Jared, let's talk to you about this too. So here you are, you're going to this primarily Roman Catholic country, different culture and everything like that. You know the language, but of course it's still going to be some culture shock. And then so maybe talk about the culture shock you experienced, but also engaging Catholic, primarily Catholic population.
Okay, So I would say like today, I would probably do it a lot differently than I did as a missionary. Like back then, I used to really, really dislike the Roman Catholic Church, but now I've gained a lot of respect for them, and a lot of that is because like I respect that how much they go off tradition. At least when you compare them to Protestants and evangelicals, like they argue that tradition says this, so they'll continue along with that. I actually really respect that because I feel like it's a valid reason, even if you can't always agree with it. Now, at the time, as a missionary, I just hated their traditions. I thought, why do you do this? There's no biblical precedent, or if there is, it just sounds so, it's too much of a stretch. So
Yeah.
at the time, I was definitely very negative about it. But but speaking of the time, I would probably just try to pick something that interested me in our religion and present it to them. Like I used to find it really fascinating that there was a premortal world, so I would try to talk to them about that, or maybe tell them about how fascinating it was that, you know, we have new scriptures. So I honestly, I don't think I was the best at, I didn't have the best approach to Roman Catholics. Some of them really liked it though. Um, some of them they'd be like, "Please tell me more." Like they hear about the Book of Mormon. Like some of them would be like, it sounds fake."
Okay.
And some
Okay.
of them just actually would really want to dive more into it.
Okay. So you didn't like when you were doing your missionary work, you didn't like attack the Catholic Church, but you had this, how would you, so you say you would have done it totally different. Would you say like the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon and, or something like that? Or
that I wouldn't try to attack the Catholic Church, but if they would be on the defensive, I would tend to be a bit more scriptural leaning, or I would say like, well, what about this? Or if they would accuse me first, and if they would accuse, well, like
That was usual.
the Catholics do this. What about Jesus being in the Eucharist and all that? And I would try to give my scriptural interpretation. So it was more of a defense thing than an attacking thing on my side.
okay.
But sometimes I would point out things in their theology that I probably shouldn't have.
Okay. Well, of course, the original readers of the Book of Mormon, and when they got their first copies in 1830, so you look at the reception history of the Book of Mormon, what was the first audience responses to the text? And most people, when reading the Book of Mormon, when it describes the great and abominable church, would have understood it as being the Catholic Church.
Right.
And so that's always been a kind of a strain within Mormonism that's been there since the very beginning. So I could understand why you would have taken that approach. The Book of Mormon seems to be describing something that when you're looking at these, great and spacious buildings and their cathedrals and all this, it's like, hey, right?
I didn't think that the verse was referring to the Catholic Church. Like I could find the connection, but I did not actually think it was the Catholic Church because like the scripture speaks of generally as like, oh, I can't even remember anymore. But like there are some other descriptions that you can't really just combine with the church, the Catholic Church, that I feel like it wouldn't be a fair
Okay. Okay, so that's how you look at it. So now, my question for you is I've heard from a lot of people that when they go on foreign missions, especially like in Europe, that frequently the people have very limited knowledge of the Book of the Mormonism, the Book of Mormon, and there are two primary things that if they have heard of it, it's usually from the Book of Mormon musical or the South Park episodes. Is that what you guys ran into?
Not at all.
They
do not watch South. I don't know any Polish person anyone that we met with at least.
This actually bothered me a ton though. So the thing about like Mormonism is in Poland, like people don't really know about it, but the people that do get very bad information. Like generally the people like
there's a ton of misinformation.
Polish skeptics will hear something and then they'll write a whole article off it based off their minimum information. And then the Poles that have heard of the restoration will take those small articles and that's like all they know. And then right off the bat, they're talking to you about the most controversial things.
Okay, so what would be the kind of things that they would be talking to you about?
So the fact that, a lot of them call him John Smith.
John Smith, I forgot about that. Yeah.
They talk about like the plates first. He had like a golden Bible kind of a thing, like golden plates. and then they would critique that. They would often critique polygamy. They would also criticize temples for whatever reason. Masonic elements too. That was part of it. I think it tended to be surrounded around Joseph Smith and like the things he has done, I would say.
And a lot of things he hadn't done.
Like
Right.
what was some of the things that some of the things that were just outright like not true things that people were saying about Mormonism?
I'd have to think about it. Do you have any off the top of your head?
Well, one of the things going back to the John Smith, there was a Polish man like a decade or two back who said he had a dream where Joseph Smith appeared to him and said he was actually John Smith, and that he had come to set the record straight through this man. So this guy, I don't know how it got so big, but like so many people call him Jan Smith, so John Smith. And you have people who look at you ever hear of the forgery, the one about the salamander?
Yeah,
That was
salamander
the
letter.
big one that people were talking about, and inventing whole new spins on it. And so it's enough to have to deal with, like, you expect to deal with anti when you're on a mission. Of course, there are going to be people who are going to be critiquing or outright attacking you for things that they think. But having to deal with things that, one, I'd never heard of, and two, I wasn't able to find anywhere in our doctrine or on the internet. I just always have to ask for the base. Like, how do you prove a negative, you know?
Right. Yeah. Like, so I do have a question about this guy that claimed that Joseph Smith came to him in a dream. Did he have his own sect, his own group of followers, or was he like his own prophet, or what?
I don't know. I just know that he's the person who propagated that John Smith. So half the people didn't even know that his name was Joseph.
And he must have had some following that
I would assume so. I never looked much into it because I spent more time correcting the assumption than I did really studying it.
We'll have to look into that. Steve Shields out there, you do all the different groups of the Restoration. Are you aware of this guy that claims that Joseph Smith appeared to him and said his name was really John Smith? Is this another type of restorationist movement that's happening in Poland? Let's look into it. There's literally hundreds, if not thousands, of groups like this that are it exists, and sometimes they're just small little groups, but it's really fascinating to hear that. So we'll have to see if there's any documentation of this. And do you remember the guy's name?
No.
Okay. So John Smith, guy gets a vision of Joseph Smith saying he's John Smith, and this kind of seems to have made an impression on people. That's really fascinating to me. That's actually kind of a cool story that you share there. It's always interesting to hear all these different takes that people have. So now you're dealing with the misconceptions and all this kind of stuff. You're in a different culture and all that. I want to ask you I want to ask you about how many people you've baptized, but I also want to ask you, did you have any run-ins like with Catholic priests or other religious groups while you were there?
Yeah, quite a few.
Usually
online. What's that, Jared?
Usually online.
Oh, usually online. Okay, so what kind of things were you getting tossed at you, and who was attacking you?
It depended from person to person. There were actually some friendly ones. Let me think. Okay, she was a lady. She was very, I want to say, evangelical, so not Catholic by any means. One of the difficulties was that we can't access YouTube links. Like with our phones, they have a restriction on them. So she would be sending these YouTube videos, like, what about this? And what about this? And then I'm like, I honestly can't tell you. I can't see your video. But she was very much like a faith person, grace without works. That was very common from the non-Catholics.
Yeah.
Those that were Catholics, like I mentioned earlier, they really like to talk about the Eucharist and how Jesus is really present in the bread. So that was probably one of the most common ones I've seen. And also they like to mention that like Peter was the Pope, like the first Pope, and that line of authority continued. And that was pretty common. Yeah,
because what makes so interesting is that you have parallel claims that the Catholics and the Mormons are making is that they basically have the priesthood, And of course, you guys believe that it was lost and needed to be restored. And they're saying, well, no, it's always been with us all along. We have this unbroken line all the way from Peter on down. And so you have the competing world, which of course, in the Protestant context, one of the things about the Protestantism is that we subscribe to the idea of, and Martin Luther's really pushes is the priesthood of all believers, which is also in the Bible too, that all believers are automatically part of the priesthood. And so we have different claims that we're making, but your claim of priesthood is very similar to the Catholic claim of priesthood, which makes you kind of unique in that sense as well.
You need authority, and it needs to be given by laying on of hands. That's just something that's always been consistent in the Bible. So it stands to reason that we believe in the Bible as far as it's been translated correctly. So nothing against that.
Right, of course. So now I want to ask you about your mission experiences. Like, did you guys you go out now? Did you do any door to door, or were you primarily doing online stuff?
We did nearly no tracting in Poland. Like I've
Okay.
done some, but very little.
So tell me what this looks like. What does it look like for you to reach out to somebody, share the gospel, go through the gospel lessons with them and all the missionary lessons and all this kind of stuff, and then to baptize them? How does this look?
First month, like before you even got there, the normal one, which was not most of my mission, was you would meet people on the street. You would give them a little bit of information. They would ask some questions. You'd say, would you have time, like on this day or this day, for us to come over? We could give a little lesson and tell you more about what we believe. And so that's what we would do. We would schedule these lessons by meeting people on the street and typically asking them some faith-based question, like what role faith plays in their life. And then asking them about family, about some things that would get us to understand some sort of need that they had, and some way that we knew that the gospel could fulfill that. And so we would meet with them after like a month. I think, was Poland, as far as I know, Poland was the one that was really pioneering the online, like the Facebook finding movement.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the experimentation happened there during the first couple months of the pandemic, where we were reaching out to people on Facebook,
okay,
specifically in groups for the city, so we'd find people in our areas, and we would do similar things, except for these conversations were happening at a much more rapid rate. And yeah, what that led to was Poland was the only country during the pandemic that was still baptizing. Every other country just kind of stopped.
Huh. And
so Poland, while it was, I wouldn't say underperforming before, it was rising where everyone else was kind of floundering or outright dropping.
Okay, so what do you attribute that to?
I would attribute that to different areas of the world, different cultures have different methods of contact that resonate with them. In Poland, a lot of them are already Roman Catholic. If they see someone on the street that's proselytizing, a lot of them, you'd be like, hey, and they would just pass you without looking at you, or even say something like, no, thank you, nie dziękuję. So just the idea of going in, having effectively a resume already on your Facebook profile, they'll be able to see exactly what's there. We were able to have a lot more conversations, and a lot more people were willing to have. I think a lot of it was also because of the coronavirus. A lot of people were more receptive to these faith discussions, what happens after death, etc.
That makes sense. Okay, so the other advantage you have is that in Poland, amongst when they do these polls of like what do you think of America and Americas, usually Poland is way up on the top. Like 90% of the people in Poland love America. So it must have also been helpful to be in a country where they love Americans. What do you say to that, Jared?
I mean, it was kind of nice. Like if someone recognized me as American, they just might want to talk to me. There were a lot of them that just told me like, I wish I could go to the States one day, or like, will you take me with you?
Yeah. Friends, that sort of thing.
That too.
Okay, so that really helped both of you being Americans. Really, that's one country where like being American is a real major asset. So it probably makes it a little easier for you. Now, speaking of Polish culture, it's interesting because I remember Jared us talking about, like I grew out just outside Chicago, and there's a large Polish population. I'd go to these Polish restaurants and I have the pierogies, and I'm like, hey, what did you think of the Polish food? And you actually said, well, actually, Steve, we didn't eat a whole lot of Polish food. What kind of food did you eat while you're out there?
So yeah, I learned how to cook from him. We had a lot of tacos. We had them every week.
Just every Tuesday, okay?
Yeah.
Taco Tuesday, got to do that.
We moved it later on in the week because sometimes the avocados you would buy need some more time to ripen, and we would buy them on Monday. So,
Okay.
Yeah, we're purists that way.
I made a lot of rice dishes at home. At the end of my mission, I ate a ton of ramen because there was a restaurant near the chapel in my last city.
That's what you're saying. You got some. I remember, as a matter of fact, I think there's a picture on your profile of you at that restaurant that you actually ended up eating a lot of, for like a lot of American food too. Like, didn't you say there's some good good places to get burgers and stuff like that
Not
too?
American, but a lot of burger places. I think Poland does burgers better than America, like for the most part, better than your average fast food restaurant.
More quality.
Yeah, and which like with all this, like they also had good Indian food. Like it's funny how much of a variety you can get in Poland. Like good Turkish food, good kebab. I would always say that Poland makes other cultures' food better than their own food. Like their own food is not bad. It can still be pretty good. I just find it kind of plain because like it's really basic. You have potatoes, you have pork, you have your beetroot soup, and these vegetables. So
The perfect dish.
no.
Well, do they make borscht? Do they make borscht out there?
They call it borscht, but I prefer the borscht version. The borscht is a lot more acidic.
Okay.
Get to Ukrainian Russian, really good.
My grandparents had a Ukrainian maid, and she would make dinners, and she'd make borscht, and every time I'd come, I loved it, and that was my introduction, having an authentic dish like that from a Ukrainian woman. So I got to actually taste that, and I liked it. I thought it was really good, and so every time I'd come, I'll make you some borscht. I'll make you some borscht. It was kind of cool. People, of course, this from the Slavic countries, the Eastern European, they're just really nice people too, aren't they?
Depends.
They can be very hospitable. Yeah.
Yeah. When like they invite you to their home, like they ask you to do it, then you can tell like they are really friendly. Like you can tell that they actually really want to befriend you at that point.
Okay.
But like we were contacting most people just like randomly on Facebook Messenger, like someone we've never met before, and all of a sudden they see a message in their inbox from us. At that point, they might be a little less comfortable talking to us. But when we finally get to like their house or their apartment, then they become really friendly.
And so, just so I know, did either one of you baptize anyone on your mission?
Yeah, 2 people.
Yeah, same. Couple of people, like physically one person, and then another person I taught while I was in that area that got baptized later.
Okay. And are you still in touch with some of those people that you baptized?
I am. It's kind of a weird thing. I'm pretty sure both of those people are no longer active right now. One of them, the one that I physically baptized, he has some really wild ideas, and I can't blame him for it. But I'm not gonna go in depth what he believes, but we do talk from time to time. A couple months ago, he sent me some music he really liked, and I kind of like it too. He talks to me a lot about like girls, like, hey, how's your dating life? And like, oh, it's okay. I'll tell you. It's nice that I don't have to talk to him about missionary topics now.
Right,
we can just casual friends.
That's good. Okay, so you made friends out of this too. That is really cool. So let's see here. We'll wrap this up in a little bit, but I did want to say it was really interesting to me. The way we met, Jared, was I had my meetup, and I remember seeing you walk in, and I was like, for whatever reason, and this happened once before. I remember earlier this year, I was at a Culver's restaurant, and I'm sitting there at the Culver's. I'm in line for food, and I thought, there's somebody here that recognizes me. It's like I knew that somebody there recognized me, and I had this feeling about it, but nobody came to me. Nobody said anything. I don't normally have this feeling. And then like a month later, somebody comments on one of my videos saying, by the way, I saw you, and I've only been to Culver's once, so it's only the one time. I saw you at Culver's. And this person was like, and I was like, well, why didn't you come and say hi? And then later on, I find out that he actually is somebody who is attending one of the local medical schools here. And he's got a bunch of Mormon friends and he's interested in Mormonism. And next thing you know, Shane comes on my program and tells a Texas Baptist fanboy of Mormonism, as I think what I called it. And so he became a guest on my program. It was so weird. So I had a similar feeling. I saw you walk in and I thought, I think he's here to show up for the meetup. But then I see you go sit at the table. I don't think anything of it. And so I'm there sitting there across from Sandra Tanner and somebody from BYU. And we're talking, it's about 24 people or so that ended up showing up for the meetup. And about a half hour later, you walk up to me all nervous, like you were so shy. And you were like, and you're kind of looking down like, well, I almost didn't come and say hi to you, but I wanted to tell you how much I enjoy your program. And I was like, dude, I'm just a dude. So maybe I just thought that was so funny how that all went down. And I just wanted to ask you, were you glad you came and said hello?
Yes, I'm very glad. And it was really funny because like I remember I ordered a Swiss mushroom burger. I sat like 10 feet away from you, but I look at your table and then I see like I don't recognize everyone, but I recognize some of the people there, like all these big name people in the Mormon community. I'm like, oh man, they all look so professional. I'm just some young adult pianist. I don't really know much about what they're talking about. I'm scared. But yeah, I'm really glad I talked to you. You really are pretty much the same person over camera as you are in person. So that made it easier to approach you.
Yeah, that's true. I hear that all the time. Well, the first thing I always hear from people typically is, I didn't realize how tall you are. Everybody's like, that's the first thing they say. And then they'll say, oh, let me tell you about my favorite episode or whatever. And so I want to get back to this, but Jared, I remember I was on camera and I asked you, I said, dude, this guy was so freaking nervous to approach me. I said, how in the world did he function on the mission field being that shy? And you kind of gave me the answer the other day. Maybe talk about that.
It wasn't too bad. Most of the
I was
time.
asking Jefferson.
Oh, you're
Oh, really?
Okay.
Jefferson, I want to know, you told me the answer as to why Jared was such an effective missionary, even though he was so shy when he approached me.
Oh, when he was being straight up with people, when he was going out, when he was being a missionary, he was a completely different person. Like you still had him, but sometimes it really felt like there was something else just like working with him and pushing him out of his comfort zone. Like I would call it the spirit. I really did feel when I was serving with him that he had the spirit with him. That like when we were in our apartments, he was the exact same way that he described, that he was sitting there studying the scriptures. He'd bring out something that he read. He'd be studying Polish, and I'd bring over a fat cookie I just made on break. And yeah, but when he's out there, when he's really, I wouldn't even say you're not in your element. Like, I think there really is something to being set apart as a missionary. You're given these blessings that you really can feel it. You feel the absence of it when you go back home and when you're released. I would really attribute it to that.
Okay. So, and then real quick, Jared, I don't remember what you said, but how did you find my channel again? When did you first discover me?
So I think around last year or maybe earlier this year, it just showed up in my YouTube recommendations. I've been watching LDS related content, and then it popped up. I liked the title of your video. I don't know which one it was, so I clicked on it.
Okay. All right. See, that's clickbait. That does work, folks. Gotta have a good thumbnail and a good title. And of course, both of you have watched my appearance on Saints Unscripted. That's why I'm showing the Saints Unscripted shirts. Shout out to my homies at Saints Unscripted. So that was kind of another place where people have been introduced to me as well. Jared, did you have a chance to watch the Saints Unscripted episode that I was in?
Did see it, yeah.
Oh no, I meant to ask Jefferson that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. You sent it to me, right?
Yeah. So you had a chance to see that. That's good. So, well, I really think it's really cool. And so I just want to know, post-missionary work, what would you say, just it's been like a year and a half now since you've both been back from your mission. Well, what kind of impact has serving a mission had on your life?
Well, meeting so many people, I realized that there is a huge value to having friendships. There was one member I met in Mesa. He had a spreadsheet of like a bunch of people he knew. Some of them he like barely known. Like he would write down their contact, he would write down their birthday, so he'd always wish them a happy birthday, even if they barely talked. That kind of inspired me to do something similar. I wrote down a list of all my mission friends and everyone that I want to keep in touch with, and then I just reach out to them from time to time. I feel like there's a true value when you get to know someone more than just like, let's say like on a mission, you cross paths with people just because you're in the same place at the same time. But if you reach back out to that person, even after you like already met, then I feel like that's a lot more powerful to show that you actually do care about that friendship. So since the mission, I've really been focusing on being, I want to say, being more kind and not just nice. Like there's a distinction that like nice is different than good. My favorite comparison is from the movie Megamind. You have the villain, Hal. He's flirting with this girl Roxanne. He's being a nice guy, but he's not actually like a kind person. And she doesn't like that. She's not interested in her. And then because of that, he becomes a villain. So I'm very much trying to give off the impression that I'm not there just to be nice, you know.
And
That's something I learned from my mission.
good, and not be a villain, not turn into a villain as well. So that's great.
Yeah, and also like as a missionary, it's very easy to see people that way. Like you're very concerned on getting like speaking to as many people as you can, bring those numbers up, baptizing people. And if somebody's not gonna be baptized, then like it's easy to just like, all right, let's just forget about them. I think it's really important to not see people as a statistic.
Very true. And what about you, Jefferson? What impact has the mission had on you?
With the statistic thing, I was also not a fan of anytime any missionary was very numbers oriented. A lot of what he said, I'm not going to repeat it. More in the vein of how it affected my life then. I was relatively outgoing before. It gave me a lot of practice with that as well, especially talking with people that I don't know at all. But most of what I learned on the mission was how much I really valued the things that I believed, and how being a missionary was not just about being out there and spreading the gospel. It was also about being the kind of person that I want my children to be proud of, living those things that I espouse, you know? I know a lot of people don't really think about that, but people notice more things than you think. And I've seen my mission and the beliefs I've cultivated, the friendships that I've found and that I've tried to maintain. I've seen them continue on and really help bless my life out here as well. It's just, your mission doesn't end when you take off your name tag, you know?
Okay, that sounds great. So let me see if there's anything else I want to cover with you guys. Well, let's do this. You guys ready for the 3 questions?
Oh yeah,
Not sure.
I'm ready for it.
Okay, here's the 3 questions. This is the 3 questions that evangelicals come to me and say, Steve, how do I engage people from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? How do I have conversations with them that's less than that? They don't want to do that. A lot of evangelicals, there's a hostility, of course, that between LDS and the evangelical world. And there's a third way of evangelicals kind of representative in what I'm doing, what Jeff McCullough of Whole Saints is doing, what David Boyce of 52 Churches in 52 Weeks is doing, what the Dr. Kyle Bashirs is doing, Baptist minister, good friend of mine, is doing, and many other people. And then we're having an approach of friendship, and also having constructive dialogue between our camps. So I actually came up with the 3 questions. So I'm going to ask the first question to, let's do Jefferson, and then Jared, and then I'm going to ask you the question of, well, I got this set. So Jefferson, what is your favorite Bible story?
Favorite Bible story, hands down, would be I think Old Testament at first, but I think New Testament. I really liked Jesus when he was going through the temple grounds and he was casting out all the merchants, everyone who was treating his father's area as a place of place of commerce. I liked that not because of the violence of it or just the sheer shock of it. I like that it was the perfect example of righteous anger. Like a lot of people, they look at God, like the God of the Old Testament, as a very angry God, right? But Jesus, in a more human context, was able to give this example of what righteous anger is and how it is motivating, how it is powerful in its own right, and it doesn't mean hatred.
Okay,
So
cool.
yeah.
All right. So now, Jared, what is your favorite Bible story?
I would have to say I think it's at the very end of John, where they're after the resurrection, they're out fishing again. And then Jesus appears on the shore, and then they ask him to cast their net on the other side, and they catch all the fish. And then Peter jumps out of the boat after John's like, "It's the Lord." Like I felt like in that moment, there's just so much emotion like you can feel from the disciples. You can just see so much character in them. And then they go and they come to dine, they have their fish, and then Jesus talks to Peter and asks him 3 times if he loves him. So I really like that story because like you can just really feel like the characters in it, like that these are real people. Like I would say in that moment, like they feel very real, at least in that chapter. And the way that Jesus speaks to his disciples, who, he called them his friends, his friends went with them all his life, and then he asked them if he loves them, and like I just felt that was really powerful.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you the question, the second question, Jared, because you had time to think of the first one. Now I got to give him Jefferson a chance to think of this one. So the question I have for you is, what is your favorite Book of Mormon story?
That one's a little harder because like I don't know, I've read the Book of Mormon like 20 times, and it kind of changes. Like at one point, I might like one story or the other, but let me think. Right now, my favorite Book of Mormon story, it might be Alma's conversion. Oh,
Okay.
I don't want to say that. Okay, maybe actually no, Zeezrum's conversion. I think that's my favorite story when he's accusing Alma and Amulek while they're teaching them.
Okay. And Jefferson, your favorite Book of Mormon story?
Thank goodness you didn't go with your first one. My favorite, the one that's touched my heart the most, was the conversion of Alma the Younger in the 36th chapter. I think it's a lot of people's favorite because anyone who's had questions, anyone who's ever felt that way about their relationship with God can really feel the emotion in the words and can really identify with it themselves. Because at some point, Alma the Younger, he's sitting there for 3 days, just practically in a coma. And then he remembers some lesson, something that he heard from his father forever ago about one Jesus Christ who would come to take upon himself all the sins of all the world. And he calls out to Jesus and he asks him to save him, who's in the gall of bitterness. It still really touches me every time I read it.
All right. So the final question is, this one is to Jared. Who is Jesus to you?
Hi, Jesus is my Redeemer. He is the one who is willing to sit with me through all my hard times, and he is really, really kind about it. He's really patient, and he's willing to get me through these challenges, and for that, I can trust him to be my savior.
All right. And Jefferson, who is Jesus to you?
Jesus has gone through everything that I've gone through. In effect, that was part of the atonement. I trust and rely on Jesus Christ more than any other person because he's the one person who has never and will never fail me. And one person that I feel like I can really look up to for an example on who to be.
Okay. Now, final question is, did you guys have one of these, the mission fun thingy like this growing up?
Never seen that.
No, I did not have that.
Actually,
You didn't have, look, it even has like
I have seen. Okay, actually, I might have had one of those.
Okay. I just was wondering. Yeah, my mom found this at a Goodwill and she brought it. Oh, that's so cool. That she found that. So I think it's kind of a cool thing. So, all right. Well, anything else we want to cover on this one? Did you guys have a good time today?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, I'd just like to mention, so he complimented me as a missionary. So I figured I need to compliment him too. So Jefferson is a really awesome friend. When we were companions, I could sense the most like genuineness from him, like out of all my companions. So like he always gives his effort to let people know that he cares, and I appreciate that from him. Right. Just want to make that known.
And how long did you guys serve as companions together?
Yeah, just
2
9
months to 9 weeks, or actually it was like
Did
10
I
or,
say 9 months? I meant
yeah,
9 weeks.
10 or 11 weeks. It was a little longer than your
Yeah.
typical transfer.
He wasn't supposed to be my companion
Hmm.
because he was in the English MPC and President Chandler. Oh, well, name drop. Cool. Yeah. Our mission president, he assigned every companionship. He assigned a certain amount of companionships to meet with each missionary and to kind of like get them ready for coming in. And so I met with him and he told us we would not be serving with the person that we met with online. And so I told him, whoever your companion is going to be, it's not going to be me. But then I think he forgot that we were working together because he assigned us to serve together right after he got in. So that was really, really fun. I really appreciated that happening.
Oh, that's great. That's a great story. Oh, I love ending on good stories like that. So, well, obviously, too, Jared, when we discussed having you come on, he was the first person you wanted to have on. So obviously he was probably one of your favorite companions, and I'm glad we were able to have this conversation today. Is that
Most reliable.
most reliable? Oh, there's something to be said about that, my friend. I can only imagine. Yes, especially as companions, having a reliable one would be very important. So, folks, what did you think of this episode? What do you think of these two fine young men and their experience in the COVID world, and then into the going to Poland and all the experiences they had? And how does that resonate with you and your mission experience? Imagine that there was a lot of familiar things that they said that you probably resonate with you as well. I just want to remind you to don't forget to go to MormonBookReviews.com for our merch store where you can get hot chocolate mugs. And they're not coffee mugs, they're hot chocolate mugs. You can get ball caps, you can get seat covers for your car, you can get all sorts of cool things, phone cases, you name it. Oh, I even got mouse pads. Got mouse pads. Okay, so we got the merch store, MormonBookReviews.com. Also, for those of you who'd like to financially support the channel, we have links in the description to PayPal, Venmo, as well as our patrons. And I want to thank everybody who is financially supporting this channel. Could not do this without you. And guys, thanks for coming on today.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It was our pleasure.
And just remember, the most important thing is this, folks, is remember, all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.